Pakistan is one of the 9 nuclear states and recently seems to be creeping towards a collapse. Something that has the world and especially its neighbor, India, worried. There are massive protests, terror attacks, and climate change fueled natural disasters at play here. The recent turmoil was triggered by a failing political system and an economic crisis. However, the underlying problems of Pakistan have been brewing for decades. In this film, we break down the reasons behind Pakistan's latest crisis and what will it mean for the world if Pakistan collapses. So let's get started. A national crisis comes in many shapes and sizes. It could be a missile crisis, a terrorist attack, a war, a natural disaster, or it may even come in the form of a leader. All democracies and countries go through these crises at different stages of their existence. And typically, going through one of these crises changes the country forever. And depending on how weak the institutions of a country are, a crisis may lead to a collapse. Currently, Pakistan is facing 3 big crises all at once: an economic crisis, failure of their democratic system, and a massive increase in terrorism. Let's first look at what happens if there is a collapse. You see, it would trigger one of the biggest refugee crises, with 220 million people trying to escape the country. Further, certain parts of the country would most likely be absorbed by the neighboring countries of India and Pakistan, and the remaining would be taken over by the extremist groups that Pakistan has sheltered for many decades within its own borders. The idea of a nuclear state and all its weapons falling in the hands of a terrorist group is really alarming.
I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
But what are the chances of this collapse to actually happen? To understand that, we have to look into the ongoing issues that the country faces, all 3 of them. Let's first look at the economic crisis. Pakistan has an import-dependent economy, especially for its energy, which makes Pakistan highly vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil and gas prices. The latest economic crisis was in part due to the Russia-Ukraine war and its impact on basic commodities. However, the economic crisis they face today is not entirely new or anything. For decades, Pakistan has been in a trade deficit. That means more things are being imported than exported. If you just look at the last 2 decades, the country has seen an ever-increasing trade deficit. And in order to sustain it, it has been borrowing money. Further, in this globalized world, Pakistan has fallen behind on infrastructure, healthcare, and even education. All things that would help Pakistan move out of poverty, improve its economy, and increase the living standards of the people who reside in Pakistan. If you want an in-depth analysis of why Pakistan has failed to fix its economy, I made a separate video about that. Feel free to check it out after you're done with this one. Let's carry on. When the Ukraine-Russia war started, the inflation in Pakistan skyrocketed. Ever since, the poor and the lower middle class has struggled to afford food and basic needs. At the time of making this video, the inflation in Pakistan is hovering close to 36.4%. While the nation is going through these tough economic times, the Prime Minister of the country was forced out of the office. And this brings us to the next big crisis that the country faces. You see, this is not the first time in Pakistan that a Prime Minister has been forced to step down. It is so common that in the entire history of the country, no Prime Minister has ever served a single complete term. The political structure in Pakistan is what you may call a military hybrid system. The military of Pakistan has been involved in the politics of the country for most of its existence. Pakistan has been under military rule for about 34 out of its 76 years of existence. Even when military is not directly in control, the party or person with military backing gets to form a government. If the military establishment sees a government is no longer good for their own bottom line, they pull back their. And a similar thing is what happened in 2022 when the Prime Minister Imran Khan fell out of favors with the military. Now, typically, most of the prime ministers would just fall to the sidelines and wait for another opportunity to get back in the office. However, once Imran Khan was out of the office, he started questioning the legitimacy of the government that replaced him, and also started questioning the top tier of the military, something you don't do in Pakistan if you want to survive. Now, the current government, which has, of course, military support, has put a bunch of cases against him, from corruption to terrorism, and the Election Commission at the same time has banned him from contesting or running for any public office for the next 5 years. Imran Khan is also very different from all previous prime ministers in one key manner. That is the support he enjoys. At no point in the history have people protested to the levels they are protesting at this moment. or have been willing to go against the army because the army is the almighty. Here's the thing, the Pakistani military's involvement is as undemocratic as it can be. And even then, they've always enjoyed a positive public opinion. The world has always known if all else fails, the military would prevent the country from imploding. However, with Imran Khan being vocal about the military's involvement, it is a double-edged sword. On one end, people are finally participating in a democratic process in the form of protests and supporting their leader. Meanwhile, it is a bit concerning from the stability point of view as the military is losing its appeal and support within the nation of 220 million people. And the final crisis is something that has been brought to you by both the politicians and the military in Pakistan. For decades, Pakistan has trained and harbored terrorists that have then carried out attacks in India and other countries. I made a series about the mastermind of 9/11 and his connections with Pakistan, how it's almost a family business for that family to go blow up things. You may check that video out at the end of this one. Even with these extremist groups existing within Pakistan, the military has done a decent job at keeping them in check. But with the recent rise of Taliban in Afghanistan and an increase in internal conflict and rising separatist movement, there has been a sharp increase in number of terrorist attacks. This is not the first time Pakistan is dealing with extremism or terrorist attacks within the country. However, with Pakistan facing all these crises, with people not having enough food and jobs and pretty much being left with no options, the risk of radicalization among people is higher than ever before. There is a very likely chance that there will be a big number of people who get radicalized and join these extremist groups, leading to further terrorism. Now, all of this brings us to the final question. So, what is the likelihood of Pakistan collapsing, and how concerned should India and other neighboring countries be? The answer is quite straightforward. I don't believe that Pakistan's collapse is imminent. Instead, it is likely to continue its messy journey as before. However, the consequences of such a scenario need to be considered because each major crisis in Pakistan leaves Pakistani state weaker and correspondingly more dangerous, considering they have nuclear weapons and all these extremist groups within the borders. In the process, there will be a lot of bloodshed and common people of Pakistan who will die and lose their loved ones. That being said, both the Pakistani government and the military need to find a way to fix this economy, especially the military. The military needs to reevaluate its position within the country, as a lot of the economic crisis the country is facing stems from the military expenditure and the way they have been making themselves rich, meanwhile the rest of the people suffer. That's it for this video. Please check out the videos I mentioned earlier. They're in the description. I'll see you in a bit. Bye.